Okay, good morning, Shavua Tov, and a good Tavach, everyone. We're continuing here in Sefer Tehillim, and we are moving to the next one, which is Pei Aleph, number 81. And as is pretty much our custom, we look at the introduction of Rabbi, who wrote a very beautiful anthology and the commentary on Tehillim, and he just gives us an insight of what exactly we should expect. Now, it's a bit of a tricky Tehillim for us to learn, and the reason is, as we'll see from his words, there's two dual ideas and concepts that are going on in this Tehillim in Pei Aleph. One is going to be related to
Rabbi, oh, now we can hear you.
One is going to be related to Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus from Egypt, and the other one is going to be related to Rosh Hashanah. So Yetzias Mitzrayim, we're not so far off from Pesach, and now we're heading through Sfiras HaOmer, and we're coming to Har Sinai by Shavuos. So we're in that time period of the year where we can understand very deeply the lessons that we have to learn from Yetzias Mitzrayim. However, Rosh Hashanah is not around the corner, it's coming in quite a few months. And I don't really want to get into the world of Rosh Hashanah because it's a whole different concept together. Perhaps what we'll do is we'll just make a little mark for ourselves and a reminder that when we come to the month of Elul, we get closer to Rosh Hashanah, we'll have to come back to Mizmor Pei Aleph, number 81, and we'll have to see the ideas that it speaks about for Tekiyah Shofar and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Adin and Tshuva and coming back to Hashem. But right now I think the main focus is going to be on Yetzias Mitzrayim and that which the Tehillim is talking about. So Rabbi writes in his introduction the following idea. And that is that in the last Tehillim that we learned, number 80, Klal Yisrael is beseeching HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we should be redeemed from the Golus, from the exile. That's what we spoke about. And in number 81, which we're in right now, it is a celebration of divine salvation which ended our servitude from Mitzrayim. Klal Yisrael was in Mitzrayim, we were in Egypt, we were slaves to Paro, there was 210 years of back-breaking labor, it was misery for us, and eventually, B'chazdei Hashem, all of that ended, and we celebrate that salvation. So even though, and this is the important part of this Tehillim, that even though that the ultimate Yitzhak, the ultimate redemption, was when we left Mitzrayim on the 15th day of Nisan, however, that the process of the redemption is something that began 6 months earlier, and that was on the 1st of Tishrei, on Rosh Hashanah of that year that Klal Yisrael was going to leave Mitzrayim. And therefore, it's the day that Klal Yisrael stopped working. It's when the loads were taken off of our shoulders, as Chazal say, and we were able to now get ourselves ready and gear ourselves up for the ultimate Geula, the redemption, which is an important thing for a person to remember when they find themselves in the throes of a Golus, of an exile, and they wonder, did HaKadosh Baruch Hu remember me or didn't remember me? You have to know that there are wheels that are turning always behind the scenes, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always preparing the Geula, the redemption for a person. He doesn't mean to leave anyone in a state of confusion for the rest of their lives. He doesn't mean to leave us in a dark place forever. He doesn't want us to be overwhelmed with the pressures that are building up and piling up against us. And you should know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu in His Chesed and His mercy and His Rachamim, He's always turning those wheels. And even though you might not be aware of that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing, He is preparing your personal salvation, your redemption, whatever it is that you need in your life. Hashem is taking care of us. So we just have to be patient. Klal Yisrael went through 210 years. It was arduous and it was difficult and at many times looked hopeless for our nation. And yet eventually HaKadosh Baruch Hu came along, and on that day of Rosh Hashanah of that year that the ultimate Geula would take place, HaKadosh Baruch Hu in his masterful way, he shut down the slavery of Paro to the Yidden, and he was able to remove it from us. And then we saw with our own eyes how Kodesh Baruch Hu was bringing us and moving us closer to the Geula. So we might not have the privilege or the merit, or might not be worthy of always seeing the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing everything. However, don't lose hope and don't lose faith that even in the darkest parts where you're looking for salvation, you have to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Kel Mashiach. He's the God of salvation. He's doing behind the scenes everything that has to be done. Now, that is really the main idea that's in this Tehillim. As we're going to see in the Mefarshim, we can either go into the world of Yetzias Mitzrayim or into the world of Rosh Hashanah, because this becomes very central, some of the ideas. But as I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to save the Rosh Hashanah commentary until maybe, if we'll remind ourselves to come back during Elul before Rosh Hashanah to see what it says. But I'd like to focus mostly on this idea of the slavery and the freedom, the shibud being controlled by Paro, and the release that Klal Yisrael ends up having during this time. So we'll look in the beginning at the words over here of, well, we'll start like this. We'll start over here in the beginning with the words of Gamliel Rabinovich. The Tehillim says, Lamnatzei Chalagitis LaAsaf, another Tehillim of Asaf, and that is that he grants victory upon the wine pressing of Asaf. Now you remember we spoke about last week that Klal Yisrael is compared to the vine, and the vine grows in a certain way where the more that it has to go deeper down into the ground, so the greater the roots are going to be and the nutrients are going to be, and the more refined and delicious and juicy are those grapes going to be. And therefore when you press out those grapes, so then you're going to end up getting the full flavor and the full benefit of them. So to Klal Yisrael, we don't have to feel bad when we are being pressed down and we have to go through the challenges of life, because those themselves are what is bringing out all of that potential that's inside of us. So then it says, Haninu lelokim, stir up jubilation to Elokim. Uzeinu hario, you are our strength. Hario lelokei Yaakov, and awaken our dedication to you, Elokei Yaakov, the God of Yaakov Avinu. So Rav Gamliel writes over here the following. Let's see Rav Hirsch first, because it'll tie in. Rav Hirsch writes like this: that we're proclaiming to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we're proclaiming that Hashem is our invincible strength. He is the source of our immortality here in this world and throughout all of history. And He will always be our God, even though that we have Elokei Yaakov, even though we have the Yaakov presence about us. Now, what does that mean? Yaakov Avinu is called two names. He's given at birth the name Yaakov, and yet his name is changed later on in his life to Yisrael. Now the word Yaakov, the name Yaakov and the name Yisrael have two different connotations. Yaakov Avinu is always considered to be the lowlier spiritual side of Yaakov. And Yisrael, the one who wrestled with the angel, V'suchal, and he was able to overcome, that is the higher level, spiritual level of Yisrael, of the Jewish people. And even though that we might get stuck on the lower level, and when we're on that level over here, so the way that we are acting and the way we are dealt with is going to be different. Nevertheless, despite our weakness, HaKadosh Baruch Hu continues to watch over us, to guide us, to move us along, and He wants that Klal Yisrael will worship Him, not in gloom and in sadness, which sometimes happens in the darkness of the Golus, but rather He wants a person to serve Him with cheer, with simcha, and with ultimate joy. HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts us through the challenges of life, not because He wants to break us. He puts us through the challenge of life because He wants to make us. That's really what He's doing. And therefore, instead of a person being someone that goes down into the dumps as a result of the things that are happening around them, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would like us just like that wine press. Presses out, it's squashing the grapes. You can say, what are you doing? You're squashing the grapes. Yeah, but I'm bringing out the wine. I'm bringing out the liquid. I'm bringing out something that is going to be intoxicating and bring a person to simcha. So too, whatever it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing to us in our lives, He's just pressing out the real juice that's in there, the real Jew, I guess, that will say that is in there, and He's bringing us to a much greater place. That's not something to be upset about. That's not something to be sad about. That's not something to walk around in a gloomy mood about. That's something that a person should be besimcha about if HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in fact, is helping me to get to a better place in my life. So Rav Gamliel Rabinovich writes over here the following. Yesh levayer, we could explain this verse in the following way. Hayriyo lelokei Yaakov. Let us sing out in happiness to Elokei Yaakov, to the God of Yaakov Avinu. Yadua, we know, ki Yaakov roim es lemadregas namucha. The name Yaakov, as we mentioned in the beginning, is something that relates to the madrega namucha, the lower level of the Jew. V'nirmaz bezeh. And so what is this Tehillim telling us? Ki bizman shadam nimsa b'darga namucha. At the time in a person's life when they feel themselves on a lower madrega, a lower place, and they want to be elevated from the place that they are on. Who wants to be low? Nobody likes to be low. Nobody wants to feel bad. Nobody wants to be down. Nobody likes when there are challenges and difficulties and hardships that they're going through. We'd like to be raised up above all of that. Says Rabbi Gamliel, let me give you the advice that Tehillim is talking about over here. You should sing songs and praises to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And through singing songs and praises to Hashem, you will go up from the lowly level that you are on, lemadregas nizgavais, to much loftier and higher places. What happens to a person when the world feels like it's collapsing around them? What happens to a person when they feel that they're not in a good place? Maybe it's health, maybe it's shidduchim, maybe it's marriage, maybe it's children, maybe it's parnasa. There's so many things that can be going on in a person's life, and a person begins to feel very low about their situation. The natural response of a person when things are not going their way is, we usually begin to get upset, we get agitated, we start, normally a good Jew complains, that's what we do best, and they kvetch, and they complain, and they lament, and they say, why me? I don't understand. What did I do to deserve this? I thought I was better than that. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do this? And then we call our friends on the phone, and we complain to them, and somebody asks, how you doing? Can't complain. Well, why? What do you mean you can't? You just complained. If a person says, I can't complain, that means they want to complain, but as somebody once told me, I can't complain, because if I did, no one's going to listen to me anyway. So a Jew is not supposed to be a complainer. A Jew is not supposed to be a kvetcher. A Jew is not supposed to be someone that laments over his plight in life. And if you do, you're going to stay down low and you're going to feel very bad about yourself. However, says Rav Gamliel, you know what you should do to take yourself out of that world of the lowliness and the darkness and the anxiousness and the bad feelings that you have for yourself, and perhaps you're even disappointed with Hashem? You should begin to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu for everything that it is that you do have in your life. You should thank the Ribono Shel Olam. We just had here this past Shabbos of Dovid Orlovsky. What an inspiring and uplifting Shabbos it was. He told me that about, I don't remember how long ago it was, he had a very bad heart attack, and he went through surgeries, and they put in stents, and they did all different things. And after a certain amount of procedures they did, they told him, Rabbi Orlovsky, there's really nothing else that we can do for you. He said, you have to take care of your health, and you have to watch over yourself and guard yourself. There's nothing else that we can do. We've done everything medically that we could. And he said, when I heard those words, my entire life changed. Because I realized at that moment that every single minute from the time that I wake up in the morning is the greatest gift of life that HaKadosh Baruch Hu could give me. And I heard him this morning, somebody asked, how are you, Rabbi Orlovsky? He said, Baruch Hashem, I woke up this morning. Everything after that is the biggest gift in the world. Now, of course, the waking up is a gift as well. But every moment of life that exists in this world, whether everything is going your way or not your way, you're alive. That's better, as they say, than being 6 feet under the ground over there. Says Rav Gamliel Rabinovich, and this is perhaps what Tehillim is telling us over here, Hashem doesn't want people that are just going to look at the negative. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants people that are going to look at the positive. The positive in ourselves, in our lives, in the people around us, in the situation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts us in. Can I see the good that is there? Can I change the situation so that I should be able to know what is right and be able to follow in that way, and not see the bad and not complain and have a negative look on this world? If I will be that kind of person, and I will literally sing out songs and praises to the Ribbono Shel Olam for all the good that He does to me, even in the bad things, quote unquote, let me find the good that is there. When I do that, I lift myself up from the lowly level, and I ascend to a much higher level in my life. And therefore, that's the beginning of this Tehillim over here. And this is really, the Klal Yisrael was in Mitzrayim for such a long time. And there was a lot of tragedy, and there was a lot of hardships, and there was a lot of difficulties that went on. And yet, with everything that we endured, so we were a nation that was still had the hand of God in our lives. And we were a nation that when the time came, we never forgot what it means to be a Jew, and we came coming, singing and dancing to Hashem. So, if you look further, take up the melody, sound the timbrel, the sweet harp with the novel, with, I don't know, like a flute type of a thing, and and it goes on further. Tiku b'chodesh shofar b'kesel yom chagenu, and this is where we're gonna not go into it right now, because this is obviously referring to the Tiku b'chodesh shofar. You should blow the shofar on the new moon, the kesel yom chagenu, for the moon, the veiling of the moon for the day of our festival. It's referring to Rosh Hashanah. Now listen to the next verse over here. Ki choik liYisrael, it is a choik, it is a, now there are different types of mitzvahs that we have in the Torah. One is called mishpat. Mishpat is a law that is understandable. Mishpatim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us laws that are understandable to the human intellect and the human mind. I understand, do not steal. That violates the basic way in which the world is going to run. I understand, lo yisirtzach, you do not murder. That is the destruction of mankind. I understand I should not commit gila arayis, illicit relations, because that is the breakdown of morality of this world. I understand all of that. There are other mitzvahs that we have in the Torah. There are choik, and a choik means I really can't give you a logical explanation behind that mitzvah. It's there because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, keep that mitzvah. Amongst the chukim, amongst these unexplainable laws, for example, is the mitzvah of shatnez, that a person cannot mix wool and linen together. Now, it could be we'll come into Kabbalistic, esoteric reasons, but simply speaking, logically, difficult. There's no reason why you can understand. Even, believe it or not, the laws of kashrus Although many people believe they're keeping kosher because it's healthier and it's cleaner, but it's really doesn't mean anything with all of the food coloring and additives in your child's favorite nash that they eat on Shabbos. You'll know that kosher food doesn't mean healthy. So what is kosher food coming for? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to. That's why. And therefore, even though we can come up with mystical reasons, there's impurity that comes into the person from eating the wrong animal, because the animals have impurity, so on and so forth, but it's ultimately a chayk, all the details, all the laws. Says the pasuk over here, number 5. Ki chayk li Yisrael, that which is a chayk to Yisrael, to the Jewish people, hu mishpat lelokei Yaakov, it is mishpat, it is an explainable law to Elokei Yaakov, to the God of Yaakov Avinu. That which Klal Yisrael does not understand, but we know that we have to do it anyway because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said you have to do it. In the mind of the Rebbeinu Shalom, it is a mishpat, it is perfectly clear. Now let's see Rav Hirsch and then let's come back. Rav Hirsch writes over here that Ki chayk li Yisrael, this that it is a chayk that is unexplainable, the happiness and joy in life which Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, should rejoice in, cannot be found just simply because we are dependent upon the fulfillment of the statute which Yisrael has been given in order that it may discharge its mission as Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a job. He gave us a task. He gave us a mission. And you're not going to find happiness any other way unless you are doing the mission of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Now, you might not always understand how you're going to fulfill your calling. You might not always see how it's going to work out for the best. But I understand there's something that's out there called the mission that HaKadosh Baruch Hu placed in front of me. And my only way in which I'm truly going to be able to reach a level of happiness, of simcha, of joy, is if I'm following in the plan that Hashem has laid out in front of me. If I try something else that is not part of Hashem's plan, I'm simply not going to get there. If I look for some kind of variant spiritual service of God or the like, I'm not going to be able to reach the place that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants me to be. And therefore, although that I might not understand everything I'm doing, that's not clear to me, every single mitzvah that is there. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around everything. But I do understand that every mitzvah is for my benefit. Every mitzvah brings me closer to Hashem. The purpose of life in this world is to be able, like the Mesilas Yesharim writes, to bask in the glory of the Shechina of the Rebbeinu Shalom. And the only way you can get there is by going through this world, performing Hashem's mitzvahs, and attaching yourself to the mitzvah which will attach yourself to Hashem. Do I understand why I'm doing every mitzvah? I can't. I'm not a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. My mind doesn't work like that. However, do I understand that the mitzvah is what's bringing me closer to Hashem? That much I could. And therefore, since that the key of the pathway to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Torah and mitzvahs, so even though I don't understand everything, I'm willing to submit myself and commit myself to those mitzvahs of Hashem. That's one idea. But I'd like to share another idea that I had many, many years ago in this pasuk, and it says like this: Ki chayk li Yisrael, that which is a chayk, that which is an unexplainable law to Klal Yisrael, because we simply don't have the infinite brain power of the Rebbeinu Shalom to know the depths of what He is commanding us to do. It's mishpat lelokei Yisrael, lelokei Yaakov. It is a mishpat. It is a explainable law, a logical law, an understandable law to the Rebbeinu Shalom. I'd like to say the following. There are many things that are going on in our lives that are clearly a chayk. It's something that a person cannot understand. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does things to us it is impossible a person will never understand. The Manchester Rosh Hashiva, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, when people would come with all of their problems and they would pour out their hearts to him and they would say, Rebbe, tell us why, tell us why. He would say, you can't know why. You can't understand. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is omniscient, He's all-powerful, all-knowing. Hashem knows what He is doing. You can't understand the why of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing. All you know is that Hashem is putting you through something and He wants a response that is going to bring out a better version of yourself. But the why? Impossible for a person to know. Ki choik li Yisrael, this that we say that it is a choik, it is an unexplainable law. To Klal Yisrael means there are things that will go on in our life we will not be able to understand. It's a choik, inexplainable, impossible to be able to see. Why Hashem is doing, we'll never know. But you should know, Hu mishpat lalokei Yaakov. It is an explainable law to Hashem. That means that what you see as unexplainable, what you see as making no sense, what you see as hard to wrap your mind around, what you see as perhaps oppressive and difficult and a hardship, in the mind of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it all makes sense. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu would never ever put a person through something that is coincidental or by mikra, just happening by chance. Everything that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts a person through is because Hashem has decided this is exactly what the person needs in their life. There's a well-known story that took place years ago about a yeshiva bacher in Eretz Yisrael who was getting older, and he was already, I believe, in his 30s, and he was having a very hard time in shidduchim, very hard time getting married. And he had dated, who knows, hundreds of girls. He'd gone to every shadchan under the sun. His resume was out there. All of his family, relatives, friends, they knew he wants to get married. And he's a very, very good boy. But he's having a difficult time getting the shidduch that he's looking for. And he went to Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. And he asked Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky for a bracha that he should find his zivug, he should find his soulmate. And he said, but I know why it's so difficult. He said, I have a very big scar running down my cheek. And he said, every time that I go out on a date, even when it's going well, and the girl and I are connecting emotionally, we're connecting spiritually, we're on the same page, we even, our sense of humors, they connect with each other. At a certain point, I always follow their eyes. They begin looking at the long scar that's on my cheek. And then, the next thing I know, I get a call from the shadchan. She thinks you're a great guy, but you're not for her. I know what the but means, but you have a big scar on your cheek, and that's why you're not for her. So he said to Rav Chaim Kanievsky, please, can you give me a bracha that even with the scar that's on my cheek, I will find my zivug, I will find my soulmate. So Chaim Kanievsky looks at the young man and he says, the next date that you go out on, tell the girl the story of how you got the scar. He said, I'm asking for a bracha. So he said, the next girl that you go out with, tell her the story of how you got the scar. Bracha v'hatzlacha. Okay, the Gadol Hador, the great leader of the generation, has spoken. That's what he'll do. A few days later, the shadchan calls him. This is the one, I'm telling you, she's different than all the rest. You're going to see she's the one you want to marry. She's your zivug, she's the soulmate. You'll end up getting married. Okay? You're going to meet in such a hotel lobby. You're going to have drinks together, and you will speak to each other. Okay? He gets himself ready, and he's getting a little bit nervous, a little anxious on his way to the date, and hears the words of the Gadol Hador of Chaim in his head. The next girl that you go out with, tell her the story of how you got the scar. So he gets to the date. And in fact, she was a lovely young lady. And they were having a wonderful conversation, and they were laughing, and they were schmoozing, and they were talking, and it was very much a good fit. And then he notices, like he always does, her eyes start wandering, and she looks at the scar. And she kind of made like a face like, that's quite a scar. And he remembers the words of Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky. And he says, I know that scar is scary to look at. He says, but I'd like to share with you how I got this scar and why I have it. He said, I was once walking on my way to the Kaisel, and I was walking through the Arab quarter. Anybody that knows the Arab quarter is a shorter, straight line to the Kaisel, to the Western Wall, than going all the way around. And I was walking through the Arab quarter. And as I'm walking or minding my own business, of course you're always a little bit on edge, it's the Arab quarter, I suddenly hear screaming. And I look up in front of me and I see that there is a group of 3 Beis Yaakov girls running, screaming their heads off, and they're being chased by an Arab wielding a knife. And I realize that if someone doesn't do something quickly, these girls are going to be stabbed by him. So without thinking, I begin to run at breakneck speed, and I'm running and running and running and running as fast as I can. And I begin screaming at this man, stop, Atzor, stop, Tafsik, stop. And the Arab looks, he stops, and he turns around, he has the knife in his hand, and suddenly he lowers the knife right into my cheek, and he slashes my cheek. Hatzalah comes, the police come, the army comes, they rush me out to the hospital. On my cheek, you can't even imagine, I'm losing blood dramatically. They rush me to the hospital, and they end up doing the surgery, and they bring in the best plastic surgeon in the world who can try to make things look better. But this is the best that he was able to do. And that's why I have the scar on my cheek. Because I risked my life to save those girls. And this moment, the young lady that he's dating, who's sitting across the table, her head is hanging down. And he sees she's crying. And he says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you with the story. And she looks up with tears in her eyes. She says, you didn't scare me. I've been looking for you for years, she said. She said, I was one of those girls that was being chased by the Arab, and you're the one who saved our life. And I've been looking for you for years to thank you. You know the rest of the story. They got married and they lived happily ever after. Says the pasuk, Ki chayk Yisrael. That which is unexplainable to the Jew, to the regular person like ourselves, because we can't understand why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing what he's doing. However, Hu Mishpat Lelokei Yaakov, it is clearly known to the Ribbono Shel Olam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put this bacher at that exact time in the Arab shuk, walking down to the Kaisel, when these girls were being chased, and the Arab turned around and slashed his cheek. To years later only would his wife be the one that he saved her life. HaKadosh Baruch Hu the whole time knew what's going on. We don't see it while we're going through it. And therefore, says Asaf in this beautiful Tehillim over here, don't forget when you're going through the chukim, you're going through the hardships of life and you don't understand why Hashem is doing it. Don't worry, to Hashem it's a mishpat. It's very well known. He sees it all. Chayk is a lashon of machayk, which means it's engraved. And that's really what these situations in our life, they engrave inside of us the deeper well springs of Amunah and bitachon in Hashem, because when you have to go through something that you can't understand and you have to pull out from the depths of your heart and your soul real belief in Hashem, so then you get to a much higher level. And then when the veil is pulled away, and then you're able to see, imagine how this boy felt after all those years of dating and thinking that the scar on his face was what was destroying all of his shidduchim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no. That's what's going to bring you your wife. Do you understand? I planned this already years ago. And then when the veil gets pulled and you see the truth, now you're just elevated. You're inspired. You see HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you see the hand, you see everything that goes on. You know, we just, Baruch Hashem, we married off our son, and the Chazon Ish, who was a very spiritually sensitive person, whenever he would meet a chassan and a kala, a bride and a groom, he would always say over, tell me your story. Tell me the hashgacha pratis, the divine intervention in your particular shidduch, so that I should see the hand of Hashem. Because in every single shidduch that there is in the world, there's a hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is gigantic, and sometimes it's layers and layers and layers. At one of the Sheva brachas, I spoke out just one part of the hashgacha, the shidduch. It is a story that goes back 30 years ago, to get my son and my daughter-in-law to get married to each other. 30 years. And of course you go back, there's much more. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu was spinning the wheels. He was turning all the knobs, turning all the mechanisms already 30 years ago, to bring things one step after the other, to get this chassan and this kala to be together. That's the way that it works. Ki choik Yisrael hu mishpat l'Elokei Yaakov. And that's what the Jew has to remember at any point in his life. You might not know, but Hashem knows what's going on. You might not see, but Hashem, He sees it all, every single step of the way. Rabbi Orlovsky told over a beautiful, beautiful Maisa about he met a guy in Koilel. Years ago, he met a guy that was learning in Koilel. And he said, Rabbi Orlovsky, do you remember about 8 years ago when you and your wife were eating at a restaurant called Off the Square? Do you remember that you struck up a conversation with the young lady that was the waitress over there? He's like, 8 years ago? I take my wife out more than just every 8 years. He said, you remember she was a waitress, she wasn't religious, you struck up a conversation with her? He said, come to think of it, yes, I do remember. He says, do you remember that at the end of the conversation, you said to her, if you'd ever like to come to me for a Shabbos, you'd ever like to experience what Shabbos is all about, my friend, we would love to have you. And you took out a pen and you wrote on the edge of the placemat over there, the paper placemat, you wrote your name and your telephone number, you ripped it off, and you gave it to this young lady. Do you remember that? He said, yeah, I guess I remember. So this Avreich, this man learning in Koilel, obviously a very religious man, he opens up his wallet and he takes out this piece of paper and he says, do you remember this? And Rabbi Orlovsky looks at it and he says, well, that's my handwriting, and yeah, that's my name and my number. So he said, but how do you have it? He said, because that woman is my wife. He said, when you took interest in her and you invited her for Shabbos, and you told her, please come, we'll be so happy to have you, and you gave her your name and your number on the spot like that, she was so touched, and she was so overwhelmed by your sincerity and your kindness and your chesed, it made her realize there must be something very special about the Jewish people, about the religious people, that they could do such a thing. And from there, she began to start looking into Yiddishkeit. She found a rabbi, she found a Rebbetzin, and next thing you know, she became frum. So Rabbi Orlovsky, in his very classical wit and humor, he said, it's amazing. He said, I didn't even have to have her over for a meal, and she still became frum. Yeah, but that's the thing. You do things, there are things that are going on in our lives, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is turning all the wheels. And He's preparing everything. And He's making it that this woman over here, she's going to get this little piece of paper, and eventually she's going to become religious, she's going to become frum, and this man's going to meet Rabbi Orlovsky and say, look, do you remember this? 8 years ago, you were the one that got the ball rolling. Says Tehillim further over here, number 6, Eidus b'Yosef. Now, this is very interesting. Yosef HaTzadik, the great Yosef, you spell his name Yud Vav Samich Pei. But for some reason over here it says Eidus b'Yosef. he had appointed B'Yosef, Yosef, they add the letter Hey. Yud Hey Vav Samech Pei. Why is there a Hey in the name of Yosef, which his name now is Yosef? Why is that? Samai b'tzeis al eretz Mitzrayim, when he went forth over the land of Egypt, Sfas lo yedati, Eshma, I shall hear the speech of the one whom I had not known before. Says Rav Hirsch, a beautiful idea over here. And he says that just like we mentioned in the last Tehillim, we have a job as Jews to do our best to emulate the ways of Yosef HaTzadik. If you think about it, Yosef was perhaps the most successful of the Jewish people who ever lived outside the land of Eretz Yisrael, who lived all by himself, surrounded by the nation of Mitzrayim. And we know that Egypt was Memtes Sharituma, the 49th level of impurity. It was Avodah Zarah, it was idol worship, it was Gila Rayas, it was illicit relations, immoral, foreign gods, you name it, everything that you can imagine wrong with the society, that's what was going on in Egypt. And Yosef is sent there as a young 70-year-old man. He's ripped away from his family, torn asunder from his surroundings. He ends up in the land of Mitzrayim, and he's all by himself. And he has one challenge after another. This is the famous story with Yosef HaTzadik and Eshes Potiphar, the wife of Potiphar, who tried to seduce him day in and day out, doing everything she could to grab him. And Yosef HaYimayin, he was able to withhold and withstand the challenge, and he pulled himself away, and he then, from that, what's the reward? Go into the dungeon and end up being down in the dumps for 12 years. And yet even there in the dungeons, was surrounded by darkness and criminals and crooks and convicts and miserable conditions, Yosef continues to shine his light of the tzaddik that he was, and he continues to be Yosef HaTzadik, Ish Matzlich, always success, the word of Hashem always on his mouth. Says Rav Hirsch, Klal Yisrael, everywhere that we go in Golus, in the exile in this world, we are charged with the mission, be like Yosef. Wherever you are, whether it's going to be in Los Angeles, California, or in the suburbs in Tarzana, or in Baltimore, or in New York, or in Kansas City, or in Kentucky, wherever you're going to be, your job is to remain strong like Yosef. Which means that if Yosef was able to be all on his own and withstand every single spiritual challenge that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent his way, and only become stronger as a result of it, wherever you find yourself, wherever you are in life, whatever you are going through, there is no reason why you should not be able to find the strength on the inside and overcome the challenges, spiritual and the like, that Hashem sends our way. Now we have an advantage. Yosef was all by himself. Baruch Hashem, even in Tarzana, we're not all by ourselves. We have a shul. We have classes, we have friends, we have community, we have people around us. We have access to be able to listen to shiurim online and the like. We can pick up a book. In the old days, if you didn't speak Hebrew, you're finished. You'll never understand the Chumash. You'll never be able to open up a book about Mussar, about ethics. You'll never be able to work on yourself. Today, with an art scroll publishing company, almost every single book that you could possibly want to learn, it's all there in English, in good English, and understandable, with explanations, with footnotes on the bottom. We're no longer a nation that is alone. Wherever we go throughout the world, wherever we travel, whatever we're going through, there's always a way for us to maintain our true identity as what it means to be a Jew. And therefore he writes, it indicates Yisrael's task to emulate Yosef, to remain faithful to the spiritual and moral truth and the purity of its calling, even in the midst of the foreign nations and despite constant association with alien influence. It's not easy. It's not easy. There's a mitzvah in the Torah that says, "Leiseleichu b'chukas hagoyim." It's a loisase, a negative commandment. Do not go in the chukos, in the ways of the non-Jewish world. You can't. But when you're living amongst the non-Jewish world, and that's much more around you than the ways of the Jews, and everywhere that you look, there's another chukas hagoyim, there's another way that they go, there's another thing that they do. How does a person withstand the challenges? Says Tehillim over here, it's simple if you stay focused. And that is, if Yosef HaTzadik could do it by himself, you could do it yourself as well. Because you're no longer on your own. We are surrounded, we are connected, we have people, we have learning, we have shuls, we have yeshivas, we have everything going our way, and therefore, we got to stay strong. And he says, that's why the letter Hey is added to Yosef's name. The Hey is one of the letters in the name of Hashem. And the pasuk is telling us over here that the name Yosef is changing to one of the names of Hashem himself to say that Yosef never disavowed the name of Hashem, and he would never ever do so. Be Yosef. In Yosef, meaning in Yosef you will find the person who was always serving the Rebbeinu Shalom. You will find the one that is doing the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You will find the one that is staying focused and dedicated to Hashem. And therefore, every single one of us, as we try to emulate the ways of our Holy Father, Yosef HaTzadik, who was the one that was able to come to Mitzrayim and maintain his Jewish identity, and he raised children who maintain the Jewish. That's one of the reasons we give our children a bracha. Friday night, they should be like Ephraim and Menashe. One of the reasons is because Ephraim and Menashe, they were raised in Egypt. They didn't have a cheder, they didn't have a school, they had no friends, nobody. It was Yosef and his two sons, that's it. How do you expect a child who's raised in Egypt? That means there are screens everywhere, everyone's walking around on their iPhones, on social media. They hear all the talk in the air. The coliseums are filled with sports and the like, and movies and Netflix. How do you raise a kid in such a place like that? And they become Ephraim and Menashe, worthy of being part of the tribes of Klal Yisrael. And therefore we give our children a bracha Friday night. My dear children, wherever you're being raised, Yerushalayim, Bnei Brak, Tarzana, America, England, Australia, Melbourne, Sydney, South Africa, Cape Town, wherever you are, you should maintain your Jewish identity and realize how precious and how valuable and how special it is to be a Yid, to be a Jew. And therefore, we learn from the life of Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef taught us what it means to be proud to be a Jew. And that's what we are trying to accomplish here. Svaslo Yudati Eshma, the true knowledge of Hashem came to us only from Yetzias Mitzrayim, from the Exodus. Because whenever the course of time we would lose the knowledge through our errors, Hashem, hu lo yadati, means if we ever get to a place in the Gullus where we forget about the Rebbeinu Shalom, just remind yourself, Yetzias Mitzrayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself. He exposed himself. He destroyed our enemies. He lifted Klal Yisrael up to the highest of levels. There was nevuah, there was prophecy, there was miracles, there were signs, there were wonders. There was tremendous direct hashgacha pratis, the divine intervention that Hashem did to us through the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim we spoke about many times. That's where we got to know Hashem. And therefore, if you're ever struggling to know where our Kodesh Baruch Hu is, just look back. Look back in the Chumash, look back in the story, and you'll see our Kodesh Baruch Hu. And we'll conclude over here with 7 and 8. Hasiroisi meisevo shichmai. I removed his shoulder from the burden. Kapav midur tavarna, and now his hands stay away from the kettle, from the pot. Batsara karasa, you called out in distress. V'achaltzeka, and I made you free. Encha b'seiser ra'am, I answer you even hidden in thunder. Avchancha al mei meriva sela, I'll test you at the waters of contention. Says Rav Hirsch over here, in these psukim over here, Hashem's power to grant us physical freedom, to rid our shoulders of the burden, was for one reason and one reason only. Not that we should no longer be slaves. Okay, he doesn't want us to be slaves. He doesn't want us to remain like that. But the real reason that he freed us from the bondage of Mitzrayim was for our moral and our spiritual liberation. As we know, the Egyptians not only tortured us physically, not only did they enslave us, our bodies and the like, but they also enslaved our minds and our hearts and our souls. Mitzrayim is a language of Meitzar, to constrict and confine. They confined us into their world. They limited us in their world, in their society. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu removed us, he removed the chains and the shackles of physical slavery, but more than that, he liberated our minds and our hearts and our souls, that we could once again recognize who we are. The liberation from the power of lust, however, can only be brought about through our actions. And that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu expects us to accomplish. Meaning, Hashem says, I'm going to free you. I'm going to take you out of Mitzrayim. But your inner work of who you're going to become, what you're going to do, what you're going to accomplish, that's up to you. I don't do that, says Hashem. I'll now give you the respite that you need. I'll give you a moment to be able to catch your breath and be able to meditate on your life and what the purpose of it is all about. I'll give that time and space to you. What you're going to do with that, that is going to be in your hands and up to you. The world of Bechira, the world of our free will, as the Rambam writes, it's very interesting. If you look at the Rambam in Hilchas Tshuva, Perek, the 5th chapter, he's speaking over there about his masterful outlook and idea of how Bechira, how free will works. Now, the way the Rambam writes in general is the way of the Rishonim, the earliest of commentators, and that is, they rarely ever repeat the message again and again and again. They speak with exactness. They get the message across clear the first time, and you are supposed to take their words very seriously and understand them, and then we can move on to the next idea and the next one, and so on and so forth. In the words of the Rambam, when he's writing about the world of Bechira, the Rambam writes a particular idea over and over and over again. And that is that you should know that Bechira, the world of free will, that gift, it's in your hands. And you will decide the person that you want to become in life. It's up to you and nobody else. And you should know, says the Rambam, at no point in your life could you ever claim and could you ever forgive yourself and say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it wasn't me. You put me in a certain place at a certain time with people around me, and they forced me, and they convinced me, and they pulled me. Or, Hashem, you made me like this. I'm an angry person. You meet people that are angry all the time. So, your anger really, it's offensive. It's really, it hurts when you talk to me like that. And the person says back, that's the way Hashem made me. Says the Rambam, no, it doesn't work like that. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu made you in a way that you're going to have a challenge. But if you remain the angry person, that is your choice. And the Rambam says many times, you should know, no one's forcing you. No one's pushing you. Hashem did not program you. Hashem did not make you like this. He didn't decree at the beginning of your creation, this is what the kind of life you're going to lead. You, on your own volition, have chosen to live your life in this particular way. The Rambam says it again and again and again, uncharacteristic in the writings of the Rambam. Why? Because he has to drive home this point, because we don't believe this. We can blame everybody. What do you want from me? This is the way that they treated me. What do you want from me? It's their fault. What do you want from me? Hashem made me this way. Says no, it's not true. You chose. Says the Rav Hirsch over here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'll redeem you. I'll liberate you physically. I'll take you out of the clutches of the Egyptians. I'll make signs and wonders. Now you're free. But if you're going to be removed from the chains of lust and the mistakes that you are making and your own shortcomings, that's up to you. I'm giving you a chance. Why don't you become like a Yosef? Just like Yosef remained faithful to the Rebbeinu Shalom and everything they did, why don't you be like Yosef? Remain faithful to Hashem. That means being faithful to yourself. Recognizing the qualities, the strengths, the abilities that you have inside of yourself, and then using them to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why he writes, the same God that is so near us, and he delivers us from our distress, he was really doing it because he wants to educate us. What does that mean? Even at the times when he seemed to withdraw his countenance from behind the thundercloud, it was tried and trained us by denying us the fulfillment of our heart's desires. You go look at Klal Yisrael in the Midbar in the wilderness. What goes on over there? He doesn't give us food the way that we want. He doesn't give us water the way that he wants. We didn't get this the way that we want. And that's where the Jewish people begin complaining to Hashem. Says Hashem, don't complain. The reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did that was to show you, you don't need to have every single one of your desires satisfied in this world to be a happy person. If you recognize all of the brachas that Hashem sends, He's sending man min hashamayim. He has the Be'er Shel Miriam, the well of water that's giving you water. Clouds of glory surrounding you. You don't need everything you think that you need and you want to be a happy person. You begin to train yourself to realize, I have everything that I need. And then I can control my unbridled desires, then I can control my wants, then I can control my jealousy and my lowly midas that I have. I can begin to control all of that. And we'll conclude with these words over here. He says, Hashem freed us from slavery in order to train us to achieve spiritual and moral greatness as individuals and a nation. Every time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put us through the Golus, it was to work on us, that we should work on ourselves. When He took us out, it was to give us that space that we need to truly become the great nation that we could. And therefore, our destiny had already been proclaimed and shall be kept in our conscious awareness by the establishment of this Yitzhak, this liberation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is taking us out from. And this Yetz Hashem is the halfway point of this Tehillim, and that is that we have to recognize it's all good. And even though that we don't understand, the Rabbi, He knows exactly what it is that He is doing. And if we keep in mind, whatever I'm going through in life is part of the training that Hashem is giving me. So I should become greater. And like we said in the wine press, to squeeze out the juice or the Jew that is in there, to squeeze out the best of who we are, then with every step of the way, instead of getting upset and disgruntled and lamenting and whining and complaining, we'll be able to see, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, thank you for the opportunities that you've given me. I didn't understand what that scar was all about. I didn't understand why you put me through this situation. Later on down the road, I realized what was a chayk, what was unexplainable to me, to you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, made all the sense in the world. Have a wonderful week, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi.